Okay, everybody, we're going to try to get started, if that's okay. You are dialed in to a webinar about the Restore Act. If you've dialed into the wrong webinar, now's the time. Now's the time to escape. I want to welcome everybody. Just in general, this is Patty Powell. I am State Lands Director for the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And I want to tell you who I have in the room here with me. You may hear them. I have told them to speak up if they think that we have forgotten something or say something wrong. So if you hear a strange voice, I wanted you to know who all was in here. In addition to myself, I have from the council Ben Skaggs, who's the Deputy Executive Director, and also from the council, External Affairs Director Bethany Kraft, who's going to be, frankly, who's been the logistics coordinator for all this and the technical expert. Anybody that knows me knows that was not my role. Also from the state of Alabama, I have Hank Birch, who many of you know is the manager here at our Five Rivers Delta Resource Center. He also serves as my primary backup for helping with the Restore Act on the federal council side. And I have Aliska Morgan, who wears two hats for our department, one as Coastal Restoration Coordinator, and then also as Executive Director of the Alabama Council. So I just want to thank them for their help today and thank Bethany for getting all the technical matters worked out. And I'm going to turn it over to Bethany just to kind of give an overview of how it'll work and questions and all those sorts of things.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this webinar. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items, and then we'll jump in with two presentations today. The first thing to note is that we've muted your line, and we'll be presenting this webinar in listen-only mode. However, we've reserved a significant amount of time to answer questions. So if you have a question either during the presentations or at the end, please use the chat feature. It's in the bottom right column of your webinar to ask your question. We'll note these down, compile them, and then answer them after the presentations are through.
And Bethany, did you mention it was being recorded?
Yes. So we're recording this webinar for posterity, and it will go up on both restorethegulf.gov, and we'll provide that website information in just a few minutes, as well as the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources website. So if you didn't get enough of us today and want to listen to it over and over again, or if you had friends who missed this webinar, you'll be able to access it online shortly after we finish today.
Okay, Bethany, I'm going to let you drive the PowerPoint here. I wanted to give you just an overview of what we plan to cover today. This is the first time that we have done this, so we will do our best and may make some improvements for the next time, but we'll see how it goes. We first just want to run through what is going to be a brief summary of the Restore Act. The Restore Act is quite complex. I don't mean that we'll get into every detail, but wanted to give you sort of an overview of the various provisions of that act. We're then going to move into a description of the Restore Council, or what those in Alabama probably hear me call the federal council role under the Restore Act. For those of you who may not be familiar, under the Restore Act, the Alabama portions that are state controlled, that we'll talk about in a minute, a 10-member council was established. It's the Gulf Coast Recovery Council. So we often, just to try to eliminate confusion where we can, often just shorthand talking about the federal council and the Alabama council. So you'll hear us use those terms. Anyway, so we'll go through a description of the Restore Council or federal council's role under the Restore Act. Then I want to go through some questions that the federal Restore Council has posed. It's already on their website. You may have seen before, but for those who hadn't, I'd ask Bethany, I want to be sure and run through those. And then finally, we'll go through a description of the state of Alabama's role in various capacities under the Restore Act. So I'm going to now turn it over to Bethany to begin giving overview as to the Federal Restore Council.
Great, thanks, Patty. So we're going to start with an overview of the Restore Act and then an update quickly from the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, or the Federal Council as we will reference it today. The Restore Act was passed into law in 2012, and it envisions a regional approach to restoring the long-term health of the natural ecosystems and economy of the Gulf Coast region. The Restore Act dedicates 80% by responsible parties associated with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill into a Gulf Restoration Trust Fund. This trust fund is broken into several components. You see them here on your screen, 5 primary components. And the trust fund itself is administered by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. We'll get into a couple of these components today, but first I wanted to provide a quick update on the status of the Treasury regulations. The Department of Treasury is responsible for issuing compliance and auditing procedures for the entire Restore Act. They also administer 2 grant programs under the Act. In August of 2014, Treasury issued an interim final rule that will become final on October 14th, 2014, so just a few days from now. Once this rule is finalized, money from the trust fund can begin to flow if all other requirements are met. You can access the Treasury regulations and the interim final rule from our website at restorethegulf.gov. Please note that the comment period for the interim final rule has closed. The Restore Act also established a Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council as an independent entity in the federal government. The membership of the council is comprised of the governors of the 5 Gulf Coast states and cabinet-level officials from 6 federal agencies. You can see them here on your screen. It's chaired by the Department of Commerce. You can learn more about the council's membership and the history of our work at restorethegulf.gov. The Federal Council has responsibilities related to 60% of the funds made available in the Gulf Restoration Trust Fund. 30% of this trust fund, plus some interest, will be used for ecosystem restoration and protection by the Council, and this work is guided by a comprehensive plan. The other 30% will be allocated to the Gulf Coast states under a formula described in the Restore Act and spent according to individual state expenditure plans. You can see that's the 3rd column from the left. I will provide you some basic information about the Council's work in these 2 areas, and then you're going to hear from the state of Alabama with additional Alabama-specific details. First, we're going to talk about the spill impact component, which is also commonly known as Bucket 3. Again, the spill impact component represents 30% of the trust fund that will be allocated to the Gulf states and spent on projects and programs identified in individual state expenditure plans. These plans will be drafted by the state and then submitted to the chair, again, that's the Department of Commerce for the Federal Council, for approval. Each state has a different process to develop their state expenditure plan. And in a few minutes, the state of Alabama will provide additional information on their process and where they are in terms of developing their state expenditure plan. The Federal Council published an interim final rule in August 2014 to allow states to access up to 5% of the funds available to each state under the spill impact component for planning activities associated with developing state expenditure plans. The Council also has to establish a regulation to administer this component of the trust fund. This regulation will establish the final oil spill impact formula, which will ultimately determine how much funding each state receives. Every state is guaranteed a minimum of 5% of the funds available under the spill impact component. Now I'm going to provide a brief overview of the Council's selected restoration component, also known as Bucket 2. This component represents 30% of the Restoration Trust Fund, and it is to be spent on projects and programs that restore and protect the natural resources and the ecosystems in the Gulf of Mexico region. One of the Council's primary responsibilities is to develop a comprehensive plan to guide this work and funding. The initial comprehensive plan was approved in August of 2013 and provides a framework to implement a coordinated Gulf Coast region-wide restoration effort. This is the first plan and the first version of a plan that will change over time. The plan establishes the Council's goals for the region, which were developed based on the findings and recommendations of the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Task Force and also from thousands of public comments. The Council has chosen to focus for this first round of funding on the following two goals, which are circled on your screen in red: restore and conserve habitat and restore water quality. However, the Council recognizes that projects that will be funded are likely to meet multiple goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. This is a quick screenshot of our website where you can download and read the initial comprehensive plan for yourself. If you just go to the restorethegulf.gov homepage and then click on the image of the comprehensive plan and the right-hand side, you can download and save that. In July of 2014, the Council approved a proposal evaluation process that it's going to use to select and fund projects and programs under the Council Selected Restoration Component, or Bucket 2. I know there's a lot of information on this slide. I'm going to go over the basics of the Council process today, and in a few moments the state of Alabama will provide you with specific details for Alabama. You can also dive way down into the weeds and find detailed information about both the process as well as the member submission guidelines, and download a number of fact sheets on our website at restorethegulf.gov. In step 1, the Council members will submit their proposals to the Council entity. According to the Restore Act, only members can submit proposals to the Council for funding consideration. So if you have a project idea, you'll need to work with the individual members. Alabama will provide you with a little bit more detail on that in a few moments. Again, for this first round of projects, which will be contained in a document known as a Funded Priorities List, or an FPL for short, the Council members chose to focus on projects that will have as their primary goal restoring and conserving habitat or restoring water quality. The Council members also will articulate in their proposals how the projects submitted are foundational in nature, meaning they represent a good first or next step in achieving comprehensive restoration, are sustainable, are likely to succeed, and that have community benefits. Once the proposal is submitted, evaluation and vetting activities will begin. First, projects will be reviewed to ensure that they are eligible to receive funding, meaning that they're allowable under the Restore Act. They will also be reviewed to ensure that the budget is reasonable. Once the proposal is deemed eligible, it will be reviewed in 3 primary areas, or engines as we like to call them. The first engine is a science evaluation review, which will include information about how each proposal has established the use of best available science, and that it describes the scientific basis for the activity proposed. This science evaluation will be conducted by an external review panel consisting of experts located within and outside of the Gulf of Mexico region who possess extensive restoration expertise. Each proposal will be reviewed by 3 experts. Next, we have the Priority and Commitment to Plan review, the middle box on your screen. This review evaluates each project to ensure the proposal addresses one or more of the priority criteria outlined in the Restore Act, and that the project meets the commitments made in the initial comprehensive plan. And there are a number of commitments that the Council made. You can read them on pages 8 and 9 of the initial comprehensive plan. The Environmental Compliance Readiness Review identifies the status of all environmental compliance requirements for the proposal. Now, just to note, all of the proposals and all of the reports generated during this review will be posted online at restorethegulf.gov. The Council members will use this information to determine which projects they will include on a draft funded priorities list, which will also be provided in draft form for public comment once it's been completed. Here is a screenshot of our website where you can find detailed information about the project selection process. You just go to the home page, restorethegulf.gov, click on Our Work, and then Council Selected Restoration Component. Now I'm going to review a few key highlights that you need to know about this process. The state of Alabama will cover any state-specific requirements in just a moment. The first is that the submission period for submission window for members opens on August 21st, and it will close no earlier than November 17th. Each state and federal member of the Council is responsible for proposing restoration projects and programs for consideration by the Council as a whole. Again, remember, only members may submit proposals to the Council for consideration. Council members may submit up to 5 projects for consideration during this round of funding. Each Council member will not be able to submit every project that they receive from the public or from other entities to the Council, just as everything submitted to the Council will likely not be included on the draft FPL or funded priorities list. Right now, the total amount of funding available for the first FPL is approximately $150 to $180 million. However, we recognize that as funding uncertainties are resolved, say we had a BP settlement at some point, we will go back out to the public and start this process over again in some form or fashion, and anticipate that the future amendments to the FPL will include significantly larger projects and a project list that reflects the full amount of funding that we'll ultimately have available. And again, input from the public will be solicited accordingly. And then finally, Council members have different methods to gather their project and submission ideas, and you can review those online at restorethegulf.gov. Once again, this is a screenshot of where you can go to find this information, including fact sheets and the methods that the Council members are using to collect project ideas. Go to restorethegulf.gov, then click on Our Work, and then Council Selected Restoration Component. The Council welcomes all of your input, including your feedback on project and program ideas, but also asks that in providing this input, you consider the following questions. I won't read these to you, but take a minute to review them. This input will be compiled into a report and combined with previous public input received over the past 4 years to provide additional information to the Council members about which projects are most likely to be supportive of the vision and restoration outcomes the public wants to see. You'll have an opportunity to provide this input at the public meeting on Thursday at the Daphne Civic Center, or you can email your thoughts to restorecouncil@restorethegulf.gov, and that email address is at the bottom of your screen. We'll flash these up again at the end of our presentation. This concludes the Restore Council portion of the webinar, and so I'll turn it over to the state of Alabama, and when Patty finishes, we'll start our question and answer period.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to get you to keep. I'm sorry, let me, y'all hear a chair move, hold on. First, I want to thank Bethany for running through that and the detail that she did. I know it's a lot of information, but I think when you hear it and then you visit the website, you'll begin to learn more. It'll begin to really tie together. And I want to thank Bethany, too. If you were bored by all the screenshots of the website, that is my fault. I wanted to try to provide as much information as we could to guide everyone through that website. And there are a lot of fact sheets that are very good and other documents. I really do encourage you to take some time on the Council website. What you see on your screen now is a screenshot of the state of Alabama's what we're calling our, I guess, comprehensive website. You can go to this website, and that's alabamacoastalrestoration.org, and from this website you will see 4 links to what we call the various restoration efforts, and we use efforts just for lack of a better word. You will see information starting off with the Alabama Council, the Federal Council, NIFWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and the Natural Resource Damage Assessment, or NERDA, effort. When you click on one of these 4, you might automatically be sent to another website, but the point of this is, if you can remember to go to this one spot, you hopefully can get to the information you're looking for starting here at the Alabama site and going to various other sites. You notice at the bottom left hand of the screenshot is a little place where you can sign up for email updates. If you got the notice about this meeting from one of my staff members, Betty MacArthur, it means that you signed up for an email update. If you did not get an announcement from Betty MacArthur, then please do go on and sign up. We'll try to transmit a lot of information through this website and through those email updates. This screenshot is not very pretty, but I wanted to start here to give you a quick overview and kind of reorient you again under the Restore Act. And we keep talking about buckets, not a very technical term, but that term has stuck, and so we've all begun using that term. Bethany had been discussing Bucket 2, which is the Ecosystem Restoration Council, again, what I call the Federal Council. I want to just run through all the buckets. You've got that Bucket 2. Alabama serves as a member of that council, and since Bethany finished with that, we're going to stick with that, and although it's out of numerical order, we're going to start there and talk a little bit more about Alabama's views of participation in that bucket. Again, Bucket 2, and this is really what Bethany just went over, but to reemphasize again, these funds are for ecological restoration projects and programs. Bethany talked about the money range that the Federal Council has stated that they will stay within for this first FPL in the $150 million to $180 million range. Alabama, as a member, may submit 5 proposals to the councils, just as each member can. We understand that Coast Guard, who is a member, will not be submitting proposals, so there will be 10 council members submitting. Alabama, obviously one of those, for a maximum of 50 proposals that will be submitted and considered by the council through the process that Bethany discussed earlier. Wanted to note that there is no allocation of Bucket 2 funds under the Restore Act. By that I mean there's no amount guaranteed for the state of Alabama, and so it's important to remember that because there is no amount guaranteed, we have to be very conscious of the selection process that the council will be using, of the criteria that have been highlighted by the council looking to habitat and water quality, and we will have to keep those in mind moving forward because those are the only projects that are going to get funded under Bucket 2. So when we talk about what to expect, again, looking at the dollar figure, you see that is the amount that will be currently available for the first FPL. While there's no allocation or division among the states or among any of the members, I think as a practical matter, it may be difficult for large dollar figure projects to make it onto the FPL. We will see, but that would be one consideration due to the range of money and the number of members. The projects, again, we mentioned for this FPL, the council said will focus on habitat and water quality. And also a couple of important factors to keep in mind. The council has described that the projects must be foundational and sustainable with a Gulf-wide application. Now, foundational really means, it can mean many things, but it must mean that the work is leading to additional work in the Gulf. It makes sense to do whatever type of project or program as a first step, looking to future work. When we talk about sustainable, at least where Alabama views that, is the project itself must be sustainable. You are wanting something that lasts. This may factor into whether a project is high risk or not. Has it been done before? Have we seen the results of the type of project that is proposed? Also, I would emphasize that if a large project might be phased, that is fine. Matter of fact, that would, projects that can be phased, that's a good way to describe the project as an overall project, but you can do it in phases. But sustainability, in Alabama's eyes, also means that, because of the uncertainty of timing of additional funds as well as the ultimate amount of additional funds, we would not want to select a phase of a project that can't survive until the next phase, because we don't know when more money is coming. So it can't disappear. If it takes 5 years, 10 years to get more money, a phase of a project must be able to stand on its own. And again, the Gulf-wide considerations of this ecosystem restoration council needs to be kept in mind also. We note here on this slide that projects should appeal to multiple federal and state members. That is really part of the reality of having a project that both makes it through, meets all the elements of the selection process, but also must be of a type to gain some cross-sectional support from the council as just a practical matter to make it on the FPL. So to the extent that we can anticipate what would appeal to those members, we're also taking that into account. I won't go back over the selection process. Bethany did a great job reviewing that, but I will just say to keep that in mind as, again, Alabama will consider projects, how they would move through and withstand that selection process. And I guess finally, we talk about how to submit a proposal back to the same website we showed you before. This time you'll see we circled the Submit Project Suggestions link. If you'll go in there, you will find instructions. I'll talk about that a little bit again at the end on how to enter a project, but you can also view other project suggestions that have been entered already. We already have some on the site. Oh, I would mention before we go on, I'll mention again at the end, but I can't emphasize it enough. When you click on the Submit Project Suggestions, you will have an opportunity to print a guide that will walk you through the fields of information that will be requested on the site. I would strongly suggest printing that out, being sure you've got your information gathered on a Word document so that you can copy and paste onto the various fields. And very, very important, where you see we have noted space limitations, either numbers of characters, which include spaces in the various fields, or for attachments that will upset the website and lock you out if you don't watch those limitations. All right, wanted to just take a second to go back to the slide that I put up previously to orient everybody again. We just talked about Bucket 2 and Alabama being a member of that council. We're now going to move to Buckets 1 and Bucket 3, where you see AGCRC. Below those buckets, that's the Alabama Gulf Coast Recovery Council. In this webinar, we're not really going to go into Bucket 4. The state really has no direct role in that bucket. The fifth bucket is Centers of Excellence, which the state council does have a role in. Actually, we'll do the selection, evaluation, and ultimate selection of the Center of Excellence, but we're focusing this webinar really on the buckets that have project suggestion opportunities. So moving in to talking about Bucket 1 and Bucket 3, again, the Restore Act established a 10-member council, which it named Alabama Gulf Coast Recovery Council. And that was established as the entity for the state of Alabama to carry out duties under Bucket 1 being the direct component and Bucket 3 the spill impact component. The entity given the authority and responsibilities for the state portions of the Restore Act varies from state to state. You'll see different setups for each state in the Restore Act. So we generally call this the AGCRC or the Alabama Council, again, to distinguish it from the federal council entity that Bethany describes and that Bethany and Ben serve on staff for. Under Alabama's council, the 10-member council, each member has one vote, and majority vote carries the actions of that council. I would note also that although we'll see in a minute that the council does have a chair and a vice chair identified, there are no special powers that go with chair or vice chair. It really is a one vote per member, majority vote council. Now, I've talked about the state's role. Let me be a little more specific about our department's role, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. My department serves as the administrator for the Alabama Council. Basically, that just means we're the legwork for the council. The council makes the decisions. Our department is not a voting member of that council. What you'll see here is a list of the 10 members of the council. You'll notice that it's noted by position, with the governor being chair and the director of the Alabama State Port Authority being vice chair. Again, each of those carrying one vote. You then will see the heads of the Baldwin County Commission and Mobile County Commission. You will then see the remainder of the members being mayors of local entities by LaBatchery, Dauphin Island, Fairhope, Gulf Shores, Mobile, and Orange Beach. It's important to note that as these positions change, we will obviously have members rotating on and off, and that happens frequently, especially with the county commissions, as those leads, the chairman and president of those change periodically. I mentioned before, I'm taking you back again to the website. You will see at the top, that first click is what takes you to more information about the Alabama Council. When you click there, you are immediately directed to the Council's website. This website existed before our comprehensive site was formed, and so it has a lot of information that was already on that. So we really just send you to that site. You'll find information about the Council, meetings, minutes of prior meetings, various announcements regarding the Alabama Council. Okay, we said we were going to talk about Bucket 1 and Bucket 3. This is a little more information about Bucket 1, also properly called the direct component. Alabama will receive 7% of the funds that flow into this bucket. This bucket is divided equally among the 5 Gulf states. The total available after another deposit that will be made by Transocean in approximately March of next year will be $56 million. Now, I should note that similar to the considerations that the Federal Council faced, the Alabama Council will be deciding just how much of that amount they will look to allocate in this first round of the multi-year implementation plan that we'll discuss in a minute. The Federal Council as well as the Alabama Council will have to take into consideration things such as contingency amounts, some amount that would be necessary for administration. But that $56 million is the number that the Council will be looking at having available here shortly. Bucket 1 differs from Bucket 2 in that ecological and or economic restoration projects can proceed under this bucket. And so you can have, often and you will have, a project that benefits both ecological resources and economic restoration. And this bucket reflects that. The projects will be selected by the Alabama Council. The Federal Council in this bucket really has no role. The Council will submit what's called a multi-year implementation plan, or an MIP, that outlines the projects it intends to proceed or implement under the MIP that they're seeking approval for. And that plan will go to the Department of Treasury for approval. And that will be following a period of public comment here in Alabama that the plan will have to go through and give everyone a chance to comment on the projects that are in that draft. I will note here as we go forward and talk about in a minute Bucket 3. One reason the Restore Act is so complicated is there are certain differences in the first 3 buckets as to which type of projects are eligible. You'll see there are different decision makers in some of the buckets, different approvals throughout the buckets, and then different types of plans that have to be submitted in the case of the Bucket 2, actually the FPL. But all of those plans, the FPL, have detailed regulations set forth by Treasury in their Treasury regulations that Bethany mentioned earlier. And so anyone more information on that, please do look at the Treasury reg. There are some differences. As to Bucket 1, on behalf of the Alabama Council, the next step would be the Council developing a project selection process, and that process will be posted on the Council's website for public review and comment prior to development of that MIP. Now, this is not required by the Treasury regulations, but this is a commitment that the Alabama Council made very early on, that the process itself would be put out for public comment. Many of you may have looked at and commented on the portal, the project submission fields that we're using on the portal that you saw a minute ago, and that was developed and finalized after a period of public comment also. Okay, bucket 3. This bucket would have a total of $240 million. That's for all the states. There is not a division like I just talked about in bucket 1. Right now, we really don't know the amount that would be available to Alabama, other than the Act guarantees that no state would receive less than 5%. The Federal Council is working and will ultimately issue a regulation that will detail and give us more information about how that those funds will be allocated to each state. Similar to bucket 1, ecological and or economic restoration projects and programs are eligible under this bucket, but a very important aspect of bucket 3 that separates it from bucket 1 is that those projects or programs must be consistent with the comprehensive plan that Bethany told you about and showed you on the Federal Council's website. So those projects, in addition to other eligibility, must show that they fall within the intent of that comprehensive plan. Similar to bucket 1, the Council will prepare a state expenditure plan. This is an SEP, different from the MIP. But the SEP will outline the projects that the Council seeks to gain approval of under bucket 3. Differing from bucket 1, the SEPs will be submitted to the Federal Restore Council for approval. Again, that it really relates to the need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan developed by the Council. Another distinction for bucket 3 that wanted to mention is there is a cap established under the Restore Act for infrastructure projects. Those, the definition of infrastructure is contained within the Treasury regs, but that is a little bit of another difference between bucket 3 and bucket 1. Next steps under bucket 3, really the same as bucket 1. The Council will similarly at the same time as putting out information on the selection process for the MIPs, will do the same for the SEPs and provide a period for public review before they move into actually selecting projects. So we're back to another screenshot of the website. I wanted to say that the way to submit a project suggestion for buckets 1 and 3 is the same as we've detailed for bucket 2. You go and you click on Submit Project Suggestions, and I would emphasize that these really are project suggestions. It is not a grant application process. This is how the state gets suggestions from the public for us to further evaluate. So as an example, just because a project suggestion may be furthered by the state, but it is not tied to who entered the suggestion. The only exception to, if you have a project idea, to going on this website would be for NOAA projects. We are still taking suggestions for NOAA projects, including those still possible for early restoration. You can still go to submit, you can still click on this link and get instructions on what to do to submit a NOAA project, but it will tell you to go to the old NOAA site that was sort of the central site for collection of NOAA ideas. I'll also take just a moment, I don't want to go into too much detail about the project suggestion portal, but let me note that for those of you who do go on there either to submit a project or to look at projects that have already been submitted, you will see that it starts with number 66 as opposed to number 1. You're not missing 65 projects. We ran 65 tests of the portal before it went live, and we were so excited it was ready to go live, we forgot to reset the number to number 1. So that's just a honest explanation. You will start at number 6. Also, each suggestion that is submitted will be reviewed as you would expect for any type of inappropriate language or content, as well as to be ensured it is complete before it is posted for view. So there may be a little bit of lag between when you enter it and then if you go back on when you see it come up as a suggestion. We also may have some that have difficulties or don't make it or have an issue, so you may see some missing numbers. Those numbers are really for our tracking purposes to know everything that came in, where it went, what happened, So don't pay too much attention to the numbers. If you want to be sure that Alabama reviews your suggestions, please do enter them in this site. For example, even if they're entered under the NERDA site, if you want them considered by the Alabama Council for Bucket 1 or Bucket 3, for the Federal Council for Bucket 2, or for NIFWIF, you need to enter them into this portal. As Bethany mentioned, the Council's deadline for submission or acceptance of proposals from the Federal Council members is November 17th. The state has not set really a hard deadline for when, if you have an idea that you would like considered for those purposes of the Federal Council, but realistically they probably need to be in by the end of October. We will continue to look at them as long as we can, but based on the volume and our need to then prepare them in a proposal, I would say try to get them in by the end of October. The state may also, for those of you who may have entered a project and just checked the NIFWIF box, for example, when you go in, it'll ask which restoration effort you are seeking. The state does reserve the right to look at all of those and consider all of those. So if you've entered a project suggestion, if it's in there, you do not have to go back in and worry about if you didn't check the Federal Council box. I mean, we're going to be looking at them all. The only thing I mentioned, once again, while we're on this page, is to sign up for email updates. That would be very helpful. And so I guess we'll move in toward the questions and answers. And I'm turning over to Bethany in just a second. I just wanted to note that for the state, you'll see contact information for myself and Hank Birch. And call or email. Email may be best, but if you have questions along the way, please let us know. And if everybody's still awake, I'll turn it over to Bethany.
Now you're all Restore Act experts. Congratulations.
It doesn't take a lot. You really are now an expert. Your certificate's in the mail.
Alrighty, so we reserved a lot of time for question and answers. And again, if you have a question that you would like us to address, take advantage of this time. Use your chat function. It's in the right-hand corner of your control panel. You can just type your message and hit send. We'll see it and then address them. So we'll give folks just a couple of minutes. If you have burning questions, this is the time to answer them. And just note that if you do type in a question, everyone will be able to see it and access it. So even if you're dying to tell me a knock-knock joke, refrain. You can email us at our personal contact info a little bit later.
I would mention, while some of you may be typing and thinking of your questions and honestly probably just trying to digest some of this information, the state will be, Alabama will be hosting a meeting this Thursday, October 9th, along with the Federal Restore Council. A public meeting, 6 p.m. That's being held at the Daphne Civic Center. We have invited the federal members of the council, representatives of those agencies. We have had several requests from several folks in the state looking for an opportunity to interact with representatives of the federal agencies, and so we have extended those invitations. I don't really have a list of who all will be attending, but I do know that Teresa Christopher, who's with the Department of Commerce, in the Department of Commerce, as you may recall, serves as the chair of the Federal Council. She will be there Thursday night along with a representative, I believe John Bowie from EPA will be there. I hope that we will have some others. For those who may be wondering, I selected the Daphne Civic Center location as some of the folks in town and in that area, and I was hoping to make it easier for some additional federal agencies to attend. So we welcome any of those that are able to attend. I know it is more difficult for them to attend than state representatives, but they'll have also there, Bethany will be there, and Ben will be there, and Justin Aaronworth, who is the executive director of the council, will be there that night. Please do come if you are available. The PowerPoint that will be given that night to sort of open the meeting will be very similar, so I'll apologize in advance. It'll be very similar to this one, but it will be an opportunity if you would like to provide some in-person feedback to the questions that Bethany presented that were on the screen that have been listed by the Federal Council. So you can always respond to those through the website by email, but it would be an opportunity to provide that feedback in person. There'll be another webinar opportunity on October 15th, but other than us maybe trying to tweak this to make it better, for a second run, it'll be largely the same. But, you know, certainly if you're a glutton for punishment, that's another opportunity for a webinar. So I'm going to take a second and see if we've had any questions come in on the chat feature, and I'll also just be quiet for another minute or two in case somebody does have a question. We've got plenty of time, so if you have one, go ahead and type it in. But while we've got a second, she's going to love me for this. Elizabeth Morgan's here. Elizabeth, walk over here. While y'all are thinking, while we've got you, we're going to let you go quite yet. Elizabeth wanted to mention a couple of things related to the portal that she's commonly asked. So I'm going to give her my chair. Y'all forgive the noise. Hold on.
When you go into our project portal, you will notice there are 4 different links and on that site. The first link takes you to a printable version of our project suggestion form. We highly recommend that you print out this form. You go over the questions that are asked on that form. Some may not be relevant to your project, but we wanted the form to be, we wanted this portal to be a one-size-fits-all, so to speak, process for projects for all the different funding efforts. Additionally, there is a link to the criteria for each different funding effort, and then of course the portal for entering your project suggestion, and then there's the last link is to view the projects that have been submitted thus far. So before you enter your project, after you go over the form, we would recommend that you type the answers to your questions and your project description and all the pertinent information into a Word document and save that document. The portal is, if you go over the 2,500 character limit under the project description, the portal will lock up on you at the end and you'll have to start over. So if you do enter your information in a Word document prior to going on the portal, then if it were to lock up on you, you won't have to answer the questions all over again. Additionally, for the files that you need to upload at the end, the budget outline is a requirement for completion of a project suggestion, and that PDF file is limited to 1 meg. So please do not go over that size or it will lock up on you as well. And the map files, it must be JPEG files, cannot also not be over 1 meg. So please keep that in mind when you enter your project. And if you have any questions, feel free to call me. My number is 251-380-7944. Thank you.
Okay, well, we talked long enough to have some questions, so we'll
we found the pile of questions and the questions not under the chat feature, so I apologize for us continuing to badger you about questions when you were in fact being very diligent. Okay, so our first question here, and we'll just run through these in the order that we've received them, is what is the coordination review under the initial project vetting activities? Ben, you want to take that one?
Sure. It's one of the pieces of feedback that we received in the initial round of public engagement that we did was a clear message from the public to say, hey guys, there's more than just the Restore Council doing work in the Gulf. You need to make sure that you are coordinating with the other funding streams that are engaged in Gulf work, like NIFWIF, like the NRDA process. And so there are multiple points in the Restore project process where coordination with those entities will take place. And as we move through the process, the closer we get to having a funded priorities list, that coordination becomes more and more in-depth. So it starts with a very cursory coordination review, and as projects find their way onto the funded priorities list in draft form, that's when we really need to sit down with, for example, a NIFWIF and say, okay, guys, we're thinking about doing this project under Restore. Does it have any major problems for what you are trying to accomplish? Are there some synergies that we can work together, perhaps lower overhead, get a bigger bang for our buck? And so that's what the coordination review is.
Thanks, Ben. So our next item, I think, is a comment, so I'll just read it quickly. Gulf-wide application appealing to multiple states and federal members places limits on the types of projects. Seems that projects will need to be focused in the marine environment of the Gulf of Mexico.
I'll give you, I mean, I know that's really probably more of a comment than a question, but let me take the opportunity to mention a couple of things. You know, you don't necessarily have to demonstrate a project that physically crosses state boundaries, for example, or state water boundaries. It can include, at least this is my opinion sitting here speaking for Alabama, I mean, it can include projects that are of a type that could be carried on across the state. Some might think of that as sort of a programmatic type of project. Also, projects that will have a benefit to the ecosystem. And this also goes back to when we talked about the elements of foundational and sustainable before. Again, speaking for Alabama, I think that one of the views, at least we had as a member of the Federal Council, was although that is a lot of money in the picture of comprehensive Gulf-wide ecosystem restoration, not sure that amount gets there. So how do you wisely spend the money? And that led to the concept of foundational. So I think although obviously marine environment type of projects fall within this round too, I don't think that in the end that it's going to be as limiting as it may seem. And I hope that I didn't overemphasize that point. The point of that was really to say that you have to keep these principles in mind in relation to the FPL.
Thanks, Patty. So our next question is the Alabama Council required to seek public comments on its rules and policies, including project selection, for 45 days like the Centers of Excellence?
If I understand the question and am properly interpreting the Treasury regs, I mean, first of all, we're going to follow everything obviously set forth in the Treasury regs. The Treasury regs do require public comment for the Bucket 1 and Bucket 2 multi-year implementation plan, the state expenditure plan. So obviously those will go out for public comment. And again, I mentioned the council on its own had pledged the public that it would put out its process for project evaluation and selection to the public for public comment. And yes, the Treasury regs include under Bucket 5, the last bucket for the Centers of Excellence, a 45-day comment period. But overall, in case I have misstated anything regarding the Treasury regs, we'll be very careful to follow everything in there.
Thanks, Patty. The next question is, will the PowerPoint slideshow be available? The answer to that is yes. I believe it will be on Alabama's website as well as restorethegulf.gov, and we'll put that up just as soon as we can. Next question, how will the state of Alabama go about developing a process for project selection? Is there a timeline for that?
Again, as far as a process, if you're speaking of Bucket 2, we're going to follow very closely in evaluating projects through the lens of the project selection process, established by the council. And I would suggest everyone, if in addition to the fact sheet for that, taking a few minutes to look through the more detailed selection for that. And then as far as the Bucket 1 and Bucket 3, the council is working on that. I don't have a date, but we will send out an email update for everyone who has signed up here as soon as that is ready to be posted for comment.
Our next question is mentioning Section 1604 and the AGCRC role, as well as the Restore Council's involvement with that money, as well as what level of involvement the public might have on any expenditures of those funds.
I can take a crack at that. The 1604 money really refers to the NOAA science plan. It's a 2.5% bucket 4. As Patty mentioned, the state of Alabama and indeed the council don't have a direct role in the application of those funds. That money is run out of NOAA, which is obviously nested inside the Department of Commerce. Now, there will have to be coordination between what NOAA undertakes in Section 1604, and as fortune would have it, our current acting interim science director for the Restore Council staff is Russ Beard, who works for NOAA, and prior to coming to be on loan with the Restore staff was responsible for overseeing how 1604 would be implemented. So beyond a coordination role to make sure that we understand what NOAA is undertaking in that bucket, to make sure that we don't, in bucket 2 or bucket 3, get sideways with projects that we are undertaking. There is not a direct role.
And let me just add to what Ben said. For those of you who do, though, have thoughts about that component, you will need to contact NOAA representatives directly. That's really not in any manner even really feedback that you may have flowing through the state, either as a member of the Federal Council or the Alabama Council. So do be sure to contact NOAA directly.
You can find information about this program at restoreactscienceprogram.noaa.gov. They have a science plan framework that's guiding the development of their funding programs and policies, and you can access that from the homepage. Again, that's restoreactscienceprogram.noaa.gov. Let's see here. Excellent job. Besides helping to get the word out about the meeting on Thursday and next week's webinar, what other ways do you want us to encourage Alabamians to get engaged?
Well, one thing I would note, because I have gotten this question, I forgot to talk about it before, is, again, looking to the Federal Council. Well, whereas only members of the Federal Council, those 11 members, can submit proposals directly to the Council, it is important to remember you can also not only submit your project suggestions, but submit your various ideas and thoughts to the federal agencies. One of the slides that Bethany showed you earlier in the presentation, you can go on to the federal website and see how to submit project suggestions also to the federal agencies. And again, although we really didn't stop and read every word of the questions that were presented today, the 3 questions from the council, just because you really need more time to think about it than just knee-jerk responding here. I really would encourage you to take some time to think about those questions, and you can respond more than once. So when you have ideas, I would say provide feedback as directed on the site and through the website of the email on the Federal Council website, and just keep an eye out for various ways to provide input.
The next question is, please cover the criteria for vetting. That was skipped over quickly. So the proposal vetting and evaluation process for the Federal Council is fairly complex. It was that multicolored slide with a lot of different steps on it. But the gist in a nutshell, and before I go into that just quickly, I would encourage you to go to restorethegulf.gov and click on our work and then Council Select Restoration Component. There's a number of fact sheets that provide both a general overview of the process and how the vetting process will work, and there's also a PDF 22-page, really in-depth and detailed process flow for those of you who love to dive down and stay in the weeds. But in a nutshell, what will happen is proposals, when the window will close for the Federal Council members to submit their proposals to the Council on November 17th. Those projects will then be evaluated to ensure that they're eligible to receive funding under the Bucket 2 component. That means that they're in compliance with the Restore Act and that the submissions that have been provided to the Council are complete. Once they've been determined to be eligible, there's a number of engines or vetting steps that the Council and external reviewers will go through to provide context as to how likely a project is to succeed, where its state of environmental compliance readiness is, and to ensure that the project utilizes the best available scientific methodology and uses best available science. At that point, when you have all of these context reports generated, all of that will go online for everybody to review the results, as well as the proposal submissions in their entirety, and the Council will then determine which projects to put forward based on that information onto a funded priorities list.
And Bethany, I think we may have missed, I think with one question above that they had a question similar on the science component.
And while you're looking for that, I want to highlight something Bethany said. If you go to that PDF file that has the detailed information about our process, that 22-page or so document, you will see the specific questions in each of the areas that we're looking for reviewers to look at. For example, there are a series of questions around what's best available science and how is it being applied. Those questions are posted now online, as will, when we get the reviews back, the answers to those questions for each individual project will be posted online. So you'll be able to see, for every project that comes before the council, you'll be able to see how the specifics are addressed by the reviews that are accomplished.
Okay, now two things. I apologize that the science reference was 21604, which we discussed. Also had a request to say the information about the Daphne meeting again. Again, that was included in the email update that was sent out, but that would be the Daphne Civic Center. That would be 6 p.m. this Thursday night, October 9th. So thanks for asking to repeat that.
Our next question was, could you please include council members' portal links for submitting projects on the restorethegulf.gov about page? Yes, we can look into doing that. Our website, as you may have noticed, between a couple of weeks ago and today has undergone a significant overhaul. If you want to find the methods by which the council members accept proposal and project ideas, and not all of them are online portals, if you just go to our work and then click on council selected restoration component, all of that information for each individual council member is there on that page.
And we do see the comment about simply, I'm not sure we read it out, but about thinking about climate change and sea level rise, also silt created by the many deep dredging projects on the horizon, as well as continuous maintenance dredging. And so appreciate the comment. If there's some specific project suggestions, please do include them in the portal.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I skipped that one. Okay, next question. If we've already submitted a project on the NOAA Restore the Gulf website, do we need to resubmit a project on the state's website?
The answer is yes. While we tried to otherwise make the portal you only have to submit your project one time, due to the enormous number of projects that were submitted and granted, many of them several years ago, on the NOAA's NERDA site. I am asking that if you want them considered for anything other than NERDA, mind you, we're looking at that too, but I can't tell you we're going to catch everything. So if you want it considered for any of the other restoration efforts, it does need to be re-entered on this site.
Will there be a mechanism to balance the funds between Mobile and Baldwin counties?
Speaking from the state of Alabama, either of the buckets, I mean, I don't believe that there's certainly no current mechanism. I think that what is selected by the Alabama Council will be on the merit of the project as determined by those members. The composition being very local based. Obviously only 2 of the members are state officials, being the governor and the director of the Port Authority. From the federal council perspective, on behalf of Alabama as a member of those, again, our greatest concern is identifying and selecting projects that would make it onto the FPL. So if you're talking about a specific mechanism, no, obviously all the suggestions you request is specific location information, and that's taken into consideration.
Our next question is, I understand there will be a balance of $56 million for the direct component in March 2015. Should we expect additional deposits into the direct component in the future?
Right now, there is no firm timeline as to amount or additional proceeds. That will come from either further court approval of any other settlements or conclusion of litigation. The only known money as to when it would be coming in is the Transocean money at this time.
And I'll just note that is for across all of the Restore Act components. The money that we have available and know is available for funding right now is as a direct result of the Transocean settlement, and there's not additional funding in the trust fund coming in until there's a conclusion of litigation or additional settlement. When will contacts for project ideas submitted to the Alabama portal be contacted regarding their submittals?
Assuming if additional information is needed in evaluating this, the suggestion, that could be any time, but there's no real formal mechanism or timeline for that. Again, these are suggestions. We could take 3 different suggestions and roll them into one, or half of one suggestion and half of another suggestion where we see the synergy and the ability to make that into another project. So there's no specific, I guess, announcement to who submitted the suggestion. The suggestion is just taken into consideration for furthering.
All right, our next comment and question. The recent Treasury revision offers that the requirement of an activity taking place in the coastal zone, that's the Restore Act coastal zone, not the Coastal Zone Management Act definition, means that the primary benefit of the action is for the Restore coastal zone, so that the project or action could take place, quote unquote, upstream. An important item in dealing with water quality resilience issues. Please comment on any considerations being discussed regarding projects possibly being well outside the coastal zone, but principally benefiting the environmental or economic resilience of the coastal zone.
Yeah, I can take that one. And the questioner is quite right that the considerations of what happens upstream directly impact water quality. I know that there are council members, particularly the United States Department of Agriculture, that's very much interested in looking at project proposals that could impact water quality upstream, but there has been no direct conversation yet about how we would go about that. Understand that from a sensitivity perspective, the communities in and along the Gulf, within the strict confines of the 25-mile geographic scope limit, very much want to see as much of the project and program emphasis placed where they live and where the coast delivers benefit to them. And so that's a conversation that is ongoing, and we'll have to watch what individual council members propose when they bring their projects forward.
And I would note that, as far as the state of Alabama, we, read the act and the regs, and for those who may not know, it references a 25-mile region above the coastal zone management area for each state, and so that will be the focus of Alabama, is that definition as the principles are set forth in the act.
Alrighty, will the second planned webinar and presentation in Daphne cover similar information or expand to other recovery efforts?
The Daphne meeting will begin with a PowerPoint, probably very, very similar. We'll talk again after the webinar today as to anything we might change or add, but no, the presentation will be very similar. The rest of the meeting will be focused on soliciting feedback from folks on the questions presented by the council. It is also, so that's an opportunity to provide your feedback in person and to hear the feedback of others. In addition, as I mentioned, there will be, in addition to state officials, some federal council members on hand that would provide an opportunity to interact with them. But the information will be very similar, and there'll be it will not really be expanded for these purposes into the other recovery efforts.
One of the things I'd like to add that will be unique to the Daphne experience relative to the webinars is those 3 questions that we went through very quickly before are really intended to provide decision makers context to help develop the draft FPL. And so the extent to which folks can come to that meeting and opine on those 3 questions, it will allow us, from a staff perspective, to collect that information and then put it into a report that we can then get back in front of the council that they can use when they are deciding what projects and programs to put on that draft funded priorities list. So with regard to that, to the extent that you are able to come to that meeting and express answers to those 3 questions, the council would very much find it useful.
And I would note, we have, I've heard several times, individuals that have expressed what's important to them and what they are concerned about, but have also said, I don't have technical expertise to know what project, would help with that. I don't know. I'm just very concerned about this. This is what I see as being important for the Gulf, and this is another reason these types of questions are being presented to help the council take that into consideration in evaluating when suggestions are put forward. So I think that interaction at the meeting will be a good opportunity to learn, for council to learn more.
All right, we have just a couple more questions, so if you have any other items, make sure that you type them in so we can get to them. But our next question is, what is the role of the AGDRC and the Restore Council with Section 1605, that's the Centers for Excellence, funding action, and is there public involvement with those funds?
As far as the council, the Alabama council role, that is the entity established under the Act with the both the authority to make the selection for Center of Excellence as well as the responsibility to carry out the duties and comply with all the Treasury regulations. So that entity will be selecting the center, and yes, there is a built-in comment period in the Treasury regs related to that. As to public involvement with those funds, I'm not too sure of the question, but to say that the Center of Excellence will then be issuing sub-grants for particular work under the items, the focus areas that are outlined in the Restore Act, that additional work will have to fall within those.
From the respect of the Federal Restore Council, we're looking forward to the day when those Centers of Excellence are named and up and active, because they can help us with the science coordination, particularly as it relates to project implementation. And so there will be ongoing conversations with those Centers of Excellence once they are established.
Yes, and the only other thing I'd add is in terms of a formal role, the Centers for Excellence are required to put together an annual report every year and submit that to the Restoration Council, the Federal Council. The Federal Council then includes that information in their annual report to Congress. Let's see. Next comment. Thank you for these opportunities to get updates and ask questions. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody that attended the webinar today. You were truly the victim of the first run of this. So we appreciate sitting through it, and also the feedback and the questions. And again, encourage everyone to visit both websites. We've included a lot of screenshots on those for that very reason, and we will be posting the PowerPoint on each of the websites. So I thank Ben and Bethany for traveling. Here we're actually sitting at 5 Rivers, and I appreciate them traveling here so that we could be in one room and try to hopefully do a little better job responding to the questions that we got. So I very much appreciate the two of you traveling. Any final words, Ben?
No, ma'am. Thank you for participating.
Thank you all. We'll see you on Thursday evening. Have a good day.